You may have noticed, friends, that we're singing a little bit of Disney today. I'm not going to lie to you. I know it's got its problems, but I kind of like Disney movies. And more than the movies, though, I really like the songs from Disney movies. I enjoy taking them out of the context that they might have originally been put in. And even more than the songs, I like the flags. Now, you may be wondering what on earth I'm talking about. I can't blame you, because you might even feel a bit like two parents, say, who take their young child, a lot like me, to Disney World in Orlando as a third grader for a week. And without warning, that child might become just a little obsessed with the Epcot World Showcase. For those of you who don't know what this is a set of little villages arranged around a lagoon in the Epcot Center. Now, these 11 different countries are represented by rides and attractions and costumes and performances and restaurants and other forms of entertainment, and you can make your way through the little villages at your leisure. Each country also had its own pin and its own little tiny flag from that nation that visitors could collect. And they saw me coming a mile away. Someone figured out that there were going to be these kids who needed to have all the pins and all the flags. And on my trip around the globe, one of the wonders I plundered came at lunch and eating at a restaurant in the Disney Italy that is actually owned and operated by the same family of the Alfredos who created fettuccine Alfredo. My mother explained, since we were eating at the restaurant that created the dish, I know, it was Orlando, not Rome, that's okay, I was in third grade, but that the dish that I came to love so dearly was actually there called fettuccine al Alfredo, with the preposition al meaning by, or the creation of Alfredo. So, I took a lot away from that trip, as you can see. Apart from inquiring for more than a year after that trip whether any restaurant I went to, including Burger King, might have fettuccine Alfredo on the menu. But I also had a lot of pins and flags that I could carry around. I remember after the trip kind of arranging the pins and the flags in my room like prizes I had kind of won somehow, not so much like a Secretary General of the UN, more like the third grade conqueror of worlds. Of course, I could hardly be blamed in light of where I was. Now, for those of you who may not have been paying attention, the Walt Disney Company is huge. In the past few years, in addition to its own original content, including theme parks, movies, songs, television, internet, and more, they have purchased Marvel, the most successful movie-making franchise over the past few years. They purchased Lucasfilm, who makes Star Wars movies, among other properties. And though less crushing of a power move, Disney also bought the Muppets. I mean, this is serious, folks. Disney is adding and adding and adding to the properties that they control. And I don't think this is anything new to anyone who's been paying any attention to the way any corporate entity functions, because they all had their teachers too. This world's history, I don't think any of us can argue, has been shaped by forces more or less overwhelming other forces to make use of their resources. For millennia, much of the history was between nations or seemingly separate social groups within nations. And from the great epics of the warring in the Hebrew scriptures, extolling the military leadership and victories of the forebearers of that faith, to the Roman Empire, which for centuries spread its influence across great distance through domination, both military and cultural, to the largest continuous land empire in the history of the modern or any recorded world, the empire created by Genghis Khan in the early part of the second millennia, and its continued heirs and successors. And there are older and newer and nicer and meaner and rougher and gentler empires that have spread across swaths of land in this world's past. And today, some believe that rather than sovereign nations like these or empires worrying so much about their borders and their resources, some say it might actually be corporations who will go to war with one another in the future. Of course, this premise was literally shouted at the public in the shockingly prophetic movie Network. If you haven't rewatched that movie lately or ever seen it, good luck to you. It was brought to terrifying life and images in the Terminator series, perhaps most effectively in Terminator 2 Judgment Day, when a corporation went to war on all of humanity. But a few weeks ago, in what is really only the latest piece of writing to address this concern of corporations taking on the status, perhaps, of nation-states, Al Jazeera published The Rise of Corporate Nations by Lorenzo Marsili. Marsili makes the case in this piece that corporations, by now issuing their own currency, as Facebook will start to do in 2020, as companies like Amazon and Facebook, which includes Instagram, can start influencing purchasing and choice in such profound, really profound ways, that we should begin no longer to think of these entities as companies, but as nations. Remember that in social media, the users, us, are not customers or consumers. We give our attention, our time, our opinions to social media aggregators for free. Then the company markets our attention, our time, our opinions to other companies for profit as a source of revenue. I'm not saying that's wrong, per se, but we should call it what it is. And the role of Facebook that they played in marketing to its users the right ads at the right time, the attention that they received from this, starting to influence fair and open elections of other nations, like this one. Combined with the plan to have its own currency, these actions are actions perhaps more and more of nations, my friends, than of communication tools. Now, part of the only way influence like this can grow is for corporations to adopt, to absorb, to bring aboard new properties, products, or ideas, ways to get our valuable attention. Just let's take Disney, for example, just out of the air. Marvel, Star Wars, the Muppets, just in the past decade. I know I'm on the Muppets, I can't help it. And let's be real, guys. I kind of like Marvel. I really like Star Wars. And I love the Muppets. So I gotta hand it to them. Disney is a company that knows what people really value, right? They know what people like. And all that way of knowing, that a kid like me at a young age would want every pin and every flag, which meant we spent an entire day in one little corner of that park getting them all, my mother is a saint, to knowing that they've collected a high concentration of what very valuable demographic in advertising really likes to watch, and learning what people like is a very important skill. It means survival, and it has for millennia. See, perhaps human civilization's greatest teachers, greatest sources of wisdom are not actually the content of the texts that we have inherited from them, The Hebrew Scriptures are inspired, absolutely. The Christian tradition is filled with wonder and blessed messages, and the output of persons, of thinkers, of religious folks, of many faiths under the Mongol Empire of the Khans is frankly astounding. But one of the greatest professors of pedagogy in the field of religion, Mark Hicks, tells us sometimes the method is actually the message. It is how we speak to others that we tell them what we must. It is how we work with others toward a solution that we find the answer. It is how we invade a nation of unsuspecting people that we take what was once theirs. It is the method. One of the great innovations of the Jewish faith was the idea of one God. But what a lot of people don't fully grasp still is that before there was one unified idea of God in the Hebrew Scriptures, there were a few different gods among the people who later merged to form the Jewish faith we know today. You don't have to look a lot farther than Genesis to see that there were a few different names for God. That was the first clue. You too could take a year of Hebrew Bible and discuss in vastly more depth all of this. But please take my word for it that virtually all scholars of Hebrew Scripture today believe in what is called the documentary hypothesis. And this hypothesis states that sections of Hebrew Scriptures were sourced more or less from 4 different groups of believers who, in effect, either worshipped different conceptions of the same God, or perhaps different gods altogether. But combining the sources like these is one way that we can see the method of bringing people together, of bringing sources of wisdom together. Then, in the eras of the Roman Empire, things were a little different. The Roman religion, for centuries, was pagan, had a set of goddesses and gods to which adherents of that faith offered worship, offered sacrifice. The whims of the goddesses and the gods of Rome formed the outlook of and understanding of all of its adherents and the worldviews that it shaped in that faith, and many of those deities are still recognized today. One of the most powerful methods that the Roman government deployed in dominating other new lands was to allow those whose lands Rome had invaded to keep what they called their local deities, or what are commonly called today their house gods. So the deal they made with the local leaders was that the folks being invaded had to worship all the main gods of the Roman religion, but that they could keep their own little gods that were things about more like the way they were with one another or parts of their lives that weren't as big as these other 12. And later, this same philosophy became a powerful tool employed by the faith that did eventually conquer the heart of Rome, the Roman religion and the Roman Catholic faith. Because if you look today at Roman Catholicism, how it's practiced throughout the world, in Ireland, maybe, or in Central America, or in France, you can look all over the world at the different flavors, the different influences, the different ways that this faith is practiced are unmistakable. This method of acculturation and inclusion for many was really the message they were receiving. And Genghis Khan, the architect of the most expansive empire in history, knew how important understanding faiths of those he was conquering was. He held to his own faith, Tengrism, which is a faith that is still alive today. It's practiced in parts of Central Asia and is deeply fascinating. But even so, he was advised by Buddhist monks, by Catholic missionaries, by Taoists, by experts in Islam, and many, many others. Throughout his reign, he allowed religious freedom, so much so that citizens of particular faiths were exempted from paying taxes that supported the official faith of the empire. All three of these cultures practice a kind of multi-religious understanding. And since all this is true, since looking at many strands of one faith, since maybe seeing the importance of a variety of cultures across one faith, or holding the wisdom of many faiths all together, are all ways of operating a successful enterprise, you are probably asking what I am asking: why haven't Unitarian Universalists taken over the world? What are we waiting for? Think about it. We pulled together the strands of different faiths like nobody's business. Our Jewish forebears taught us that. We also strive for authentic religious experiences happening side by side. Our Christian forebears taught us that. And we value the wisdom of many faiths, holding them sacred and treasured to do our work while holding close to our own faiths, right? Like Genghis Khan did, right? Now, I know you all woke up this morning wondering, I wonder if TJ is going to compare me to Genghis Khan this morning. So congratulations to you all. If you found that offensive, I apologize. If you found it charming, welcome home. All three of these powerful empires do something that we say about Unitarian Universalism all the time. They pull from many sources of wisdom. And it is our sources of wisdom, I think, that say more of meaning to the world about what Unitarian Universalists are than the first 7 of our principles actually do. If you have a question about our 8th principle, please see me afterwards. And someone could see these sources, and they do, and they say, well, you all just believe in everything. And if our tradition was simply about believing, they might have a point. We have sources, and we love to pull what's good out of other traditions, our own tradition, and put together a worldview that works for us sometimes. And as an idea, that's good. We could probably have a good life by following those sources that fit our own worldview. And the history of the last few thousand years will prove that. Some of the most successful faiths and empires undertook the labor of sourcing the good from different communities, repackaged it, and launched it as a subscription service like Disney. No, I'm just kidding. They launched it more or less like their own new thing. And it was a good tool for these faiths, for that nation, for these corporations today. But we are warned by many of this great piece of wisdom. Never should we let the merely good be the enemy of the very best. Even the Disney songs we heard today are very good. In fact, Disney is so good as a company, they choose content and themes that are anti-empire, anti-consumer, good ideas. And then they use those ideas to build their empire by selling goods to consumers. I mean, come on. It's just good business. But it's not the best. The best, the only wisdom worth much to me, at least, is the wisdom that sets you free. For me to touch, to bend, to kneel in a sense, to worship any tradition, any enterprise that presumes to know, or worst, control what is good or who is not, who is free and who is chained, whether in thought or in deed, is not how I want to get free. And I don't know about you, but I am here trying to get free. Does anyone else want to get free? Yeah. All right. So when I look at an idea or a thought, my question, if I want to simply move on from sourcing what is good and cobbling together a world that fits my reality and start getting to the best from the world and shaping a world, no matter how infinitesimally little it may be, but shaping the world I long to see, I ask the question, how free do I want to be? And that's a good question. But maybe a better question is, how free can my neighbor be? Or better yet, could my neighbor's bondage have something to do with me? Or maybe best, I know my neighbor's bondage has something to do with me. And here's how we're both going to get free together. In the span of history, Unitarian Universalism, which really only became an idea less than 50 years ago, in a way has only just been conceived. Perhaps it has not even yet fully been born, which means there is labor ahead. The pain of bringing something new into the world lies ahead for all of us. But before that happens, some notion of what will be must grow in each one of us. Sources of the good in life are wonderful. They can nourish the spirit of compassion in us. They can feed the justice we want to see in the world. They can even bring the joy into us. Grabbing a pin for our lapel, though, or waving a flag in the next parade, though, or loving those traditions passed on to us from history, from pasta to paganism, are good. They really are. But they are not the authentic, best experiences that we can have. The best, the brightest hope for our faith, for our world, maybe for the survival of a free faith like ours, is to discern for ourselves what is not merely good, but what is the very best. The method of searching for the best in life is how we nourish the spirit in our life, in us. And the spirit of life we find in these sources when that spirit is born upon a globe of warring nations, enterprises, and faith might be the spirit of a new life for our neighbors, our friends, and this aching, laboring world that we share. Someday, we may be part, if we try our very best, of that world to come. May it ever be so. Blessed be and amen.